To hire drivers, you've got to work fast and smart. Did you know Driver Pulse, a driver-facing mobile app from 10th Street, is 2 to 3 times more effective than texting and 4 to 5 times more effective than email at getting drivers to respond? Driver Pulse is the largest source of free driver applications in trucking, downloaded by almost 2 million drivers to find jobs, complete training, and communicate with carriers. Companies find who they're looking for, and drivers find their homes with Driver Pulse from 10th Street. A name you trust. That's 10street.com. TEN street.com.
Welcome back to another edition of Check Call. Today we're covering all things warehouse management. Don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter on FreightWaves.com if you haven't already. Today we are joined by Joe Oliero, Chief Real Estate Officer at Wagner Logistics. Welcome to the show, Joe.
Thanks for having me, Mary. Excited to be here.
I'm very excited to have this. Warehousing is something that we haven't really touched on that much on the show. So I'm excited to get into it today with you. But before we get too far into it, why don't you give us some background and kind of how you started at Wagner?
Sure. I think anybody that comes into supply chain from another realm is usually an innocent bystander that gets that gets brought in unknowingly, and to some degree, that's how I got brought into a supply chain role here at Wagner. But no, in all seriousness, I was a consultant, a real estate consultant for Wagner for a little over a decade, and had always kind of been at an arm's length and was curious how the sausage was made, and now I'm in the middle of all that sausage making, and it's been fantastic. Now Wagner's in a great place. We're partnered with private equity that's really horsepower behind our growth, and I guess my real estate role is also accompanied with a sales role, and I also handle all the marketing for Wagner as well. But no, great relationship with the executive team at Wagner, and that's kind of how I got brought in. And it's been a lot of fun. I've been there for, I think, 3.5 years now.
So being a jack of all trades and haphazardly falling into a career for a logistics company. Yeah, sounds like anyone that has a career in supply chain.
So anybody that can solve problems is ready to go. They're ripe for the picking.
Exactly. Anyone who's a problem solver, whoo, buddy, do we have some problems for you to solve over here in the supply chain?
That's right.
So one of the things that we've seen in the news, endlessly for the last 2 years is that there's like 2% warehouse space across the country. There's no room for warehousing. People are just leaving trailers and yards because it's like a pseudo warehouse. Do you ever think we'll return to a time where, we have kind of that normal level of vacancy, or maybe we'll get up to like 6% vacancy in a warehouse? Do you think we'll ever return back to that?
I do think we will. I think it's going to be a while, for a couple different reasons. And let me think about how I want to answer that question fully. Right now, we're seeing an uptick in onshoring coming back to the U.S. Another factor, so I'm going to kind of summarize these factors and then bring it all together for you. So we've got onshoring coming back to North America. We've got developers who are cutting their industrial pipeline of development activity for big box industrial real estate. They're cutting that pipeline in half. And so we're seeing a drastic downtick in industrial building and construction activity, and mainly because interest rates, inflation, lead time on materials, and frankly, the cost of steel and other materials to build those buildings. And then you have imports down from China 25%, which means, we're starting to look at Mexico. We're starting to look at other folks to import products from. And so when you bring all those together, we have tight vacancy now. It's going to get tighter for a little bit, and then people are going to start building again, and you'll see a year or so where it's, hey, we've got vacancy, or hey, we've We've got product on the market that's ready to go. And you're not seeing that in the Inland Empire. I don't think you'll ever see that on the East or West Coast. I think from here on out, you're going to see tight vacancy across on either coast. It's really the Midwest region that has all this great open landscape to build buildings with, and I think that's where you're going to see a lot of resurgence in vacancy in those Midwestern markets.
The Midwest will rise again. The Midwest is just kind of seeming to be a lot of the solution to people. I mean, we've seen multiple rail companies make Mexico to Midwest hubs. Like, give the Midwest some credit. We're pretty cool here. Sure, we have corn sweat, but we're pretty cool.
That's right.
For the record, corn sweat is just when it gets so hot that the corn evaporates or puts off so much moisture that it raises your heat index by 20 and makes it so humid. So it's pretty terrible. I'm not going to lie, but we're done with it. So yay, no more corn sweat this year.
Hopefully anyway.
We touched on it a little bit, but where we have this really high capacity problem in the warehouse where, the coasts are just LOL, what is space? But customer demands are starting to change. So we saw the influx of everything when people were sitting at home buying things. And now, consumer demand has switched over to goods or to services and experiences over goods. Do you kind of see as we move into the rest of the year, do you see that these changes in customer demand and spending, do you think that will really start affecting warehousing? Or do you think it's kind of that break that warehousing needs to kind of deplenish the inventory and maybe re-level set for 2024?
Yeah, I think we're coming off of the pandemic where a lot of these companies had a knee-jerk reaction. They saw a 30% uptick in all their consumer online activity, and you're seeing more of that settling. There's been, the habits have gone into place. We've seen the way consumers buy now, and that 30% demand is falling back a little bit. So now you've got procurement officers and senior buyers that are talking with business units within these Fortune 500 companies that make all these commoditized type products. And now they want to know, okay, well, what's next, or where does this settle? And a lot of these companies are taking a wait and see approach, or they're saying, hey, we're going to deal with this until we can adequately forecast what's going on. Or the rental rates are so high, there's no way we can justify putting in a central DC in the Midwest to justify this because the storage rates are just too high, and we can't expand just yet. So we're seeing a wait and see approach from the companies themselves, mainly because the consumer behavior hasn't settled on a final track yet.
And especially given that some student loan repayments are coming back, I think everyone's just kind of waiting and seeing what everybody's doing, because everybody's like, no, it's fine. It's totally fine. We're returning to normal. Well, also, in a very other real way, we are not returning to normal. I'm just going to kind of wait and see what happens here in the next few months.
I think everybody's waiting on a stimulus check, right? They feel like they're due for a stimulus check.
Oh, that would be the dream, man. That was the best part of the original 6-week lockdown. You just stay at home, watch Joe Exotic, and get some money. It was a great time.
I know, right?
But away from the pandemic, one of the things that we're seeing in warehousing is, the rise of autonomy, robotics, and everything like that. With the rise of this happening and, a pretty, I don't want to say low barrier to entry, but it's easier to get these things in place in a warehouse now and with not as much upfront capital. And especially because you see that return on investment so quickly. What do you kind of perceive as the human labor role in warehousing over the next few years as all of this autonomous technology comes through? And, we've already seen warehouses that are basically completely dark and it's just a robot picking everything. So what does it look like for humans in warehouses?
So continues to be an evolution, obviously. A few years ago, I think robotics and automation only encompassed roughly 5% the warehousing market. But we're having a lot more conversations around automation and robots these days. And I think a big part of that is because you've had this escalating rate of labor going up, and a lot of 3PLs like Wagner and some of our competitors had planned for 5-6% escalation in labor rates, and what we've actually seen over the last few years is like 8 to 10%. So at some point, that labor is a high enough cost that you have to really bring in robotics and automation to stymie or put some kind of ceiling on how much labor you can pay for in a warehouse. And once those two lines cross on that graph, you begin having real conversations around robotics. For instance, in our Monroe facility in Monroe, Louisiana, we got to a point where our customer didn't want us to raise wages any further. And so we said, okay, well, if we can't raise wages, then we have to put in some kind of automation. And so we began doing cycle counting, which is really just a quick snapshot of inventory periodically, either daily or throughout the week. And we started using a drone that flies up, takes pictures of all the different pallets in racking, and then tells us what errors there are. And before doing that, we would have to send somebody on a scissor lift or on a forklift up and down this aisle, checking every single box or every single pallet, which, takes forever. And you have to pay for that labor. Now, the robot or the drone goes up, checks everything, and then all the employee has to do now is check the errors that came across, so that they're only checking the pallets that came across as maybe an error or didn't show up. And, it's a fraction of the amount of time that they would have spent beforehand.
Yeah, I think I like that process. I feel that when it comes to automating things, you don't have to just show up on a Tuesday and be like, well, the warehouse is all robots now, so everybody have a nice day. It's those small steps that you can take that improve that, because I'm sure the person on the scissor lift wasn't their favorite job to go up there and count and see any boxes or any pallets that had errors on them. And now to only have to work the exceptions saves so much time versus having someone in, because inevitably it ends up being a 2-person job, because you can't really, move a scissor lift alone. You need another person. And so I like that. I like those kind of swaps, like we've seen with autonomous yard vehicles that, they're the ones bringing trailers around. And I like that because it takes that mundane task that, you don't necessarily you don't have to spend human capital to do that, when they could do something else that's so much more worth their time and worth the effort. That, it is harder to automate something like that. But if you can have an autonomous yard jockey drive a trailer 5 miles an hour through a closed fenced in yard, it's pretty nice, because then you don't have to have someone running around doing things. And then the human part can do the things that are harder to automate. And that's the kind of stuff that I love in warehouse technology. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like the robots that can work in the dark and pick an entire load by themselves, but that's not necessarily approachable and reasonable for everyone to manage,
Absolutely. I think to your point, it's also everybody talks about like ESG, and part of that social aspect of ESG is also making it more enjoyable for the employee themselves. And so when you take out what has traditionally been the hardest part of working in a warehouse, which is getting up there, moving heavy boxes, it makes that role more engaging and more technical. So now you're a technician that's working with automation, and makes your life easier as an employee, which makes it ultimately more enjoyable. And we've even gone so far as to partner with a group called Variable, and they help us with temporary labor, but it's gig focused. So the folks that come in from this group, they rate us as an employer. We get to rate them back. I'm happy to say that we are 5 stars up to this point. So I haven't checked recently, but I believe we are still rated at 5 stars. But anyway, there's a common rating system. They come, and if they want to come in and drive a forklift on a Thursday for 4 hours, that's what they do. And for people that want that kind of role, they get a lot more enjoyment out of having that level of control over their role and when they work, rather than saying, no, you have to be here from 8 to 5, or you have to work second shift from until 10 o'clock at night.
I absolutely love that because, it's no secret that finding labor and qualified labor in a warehouse and getting them to keep coming back is one of arguably the harder things to do. And so I like that it's just kind of like we've got some time. If you want to come load some trucks, stage some loads, we'd love to have you. If not, that's fine. We'll see you when you want to come. Because I feel like that's the best part of just, meeting people where they are. And, if they can just commit to coming in for a couple hours on Thursdays, well, cool. Then we'll see you on Thursdays. We'll see you when your schedule allows and you still have everyone else there. But sometimes it's nice to have those extra set of hands as you get them. Also, look at you guys flexing with your 5.
For now, anyway. Yeah, I'm sure something will come up and we'll get a bad review. But no, we've had good success so far. Everybody seems very, very eager to get in.
Yeah, I like to think that you guys wouldn't have a bad review if you've made it this long with 5 stars, but you never know when you meet someone on a bad day.
Right. It all depends on the day, right? You give somebody autonomy to just pick 4 or 5 stars, and they'll do whatever they're feeling in that moment.
So like you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, and that's that competition among other 3PLs and people doing warehousing and logistics. How do you kind of think that people are gonna what are some of the issues and the strategies that people are gonna have to start adapting to become maintain that strategic edge and make sure that they are still able to run an efficient warehouse and not come into too many problems that we're going to start seeing here as, we return to that status quo. We're more in that line of, less of, oh my gosh, how fast can we just move things through? And we're moving more towards that. How efficient can we be? How can we maximize our time, our people? What are some of these issues and strategies people are going to have to start adapting?
The best way to understand what costs are or I guess where costs are that can be shaved down is to understand the data itself. We work with a lot of customers that don't want to manage their own inventory or just frankly aren't very good at it. And that's where we come in to say, okay, well, we understand all the costs that go into this warehouse. We know what typically it requires to run an operation. And here's where you can shave some costs down, whether that's consolidation through LTL or if it's, redundant movements in a warehouse that can be addressed through automation or robotics. But it all requires a partnership. And that's why the third-party logistics industry, or at least contract warehousing, is evolving from, hey, I've got these products that I need to store month to month, to, hey, I really need to have a good, succinct solution for this. We understand, they continue to raise the bar. And so the expectations are so much higher than they were a few years ago that a public warehouse just doesn't offer the savings or the level of service that a contract warehousing group can today. And so through those partnerships, you're seeing a real evolution and really more motivation from the service providers to make a better service.
I like it's everything lately when we've been talking about different problems in the supply chain, everything, it all comes back to those partnerships and those relationships. And I think that, at the base, like that's mostly what comprises supply chain is you are trusting other people. If you're a shipper, you're trusting carriers or you're trusting your 3PL or freight broker to get your goods in the hands of your consumer, and your consumer is trusting the manufacturer that they've made a quality product. And I really do like that it's come back to that partnerships, and everyone has to ultimately end up working together to create a successful supply chain, because truly without one part of it, you're not going to have a strong supply chain. It's going to be weak and likely to break, you know?
Absolutely.
We are running out of time, but there's a question that everyone that comes on the show has to answer, and I'm very excited to hear your answer. Are you ready for it?
Believe so, yes.
Is a hot dog a sandwich?
Okay, so yes, hot dog is a sandwich. You have meat. You have meat, right? You have meat, you have bread. Now, where I fell a little short on this, or I guess where I had my hesitation, was typically you need 2 pieces of bread. A bun is not always 2 pieces of bread. It just kind of sits there, a little cradle for the meat. So, but it's more than halfway cut. So I'm going to say a hot dog is definitely a sandwich, even if it's just the dog and the bun. 100%.
Okay, I respect where you're coming from. I do not agree, but that's okay, you know? Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. I am team it's not a sandwich, because you go to a deli and you don't ask for a hot dog sandwich. But I like your theory, because it's more than halfway cut. It's not fully cut, but it works.
Okay, real quick, I have to give my mom a shout out. When I was a kid, she would make me a hot dog sandwich. And because she didn't want me to choke, she would cut the hot dog in half, and she would get 2 pieces of wheat bread. Just wheat bread, it's disgusting, by the way. And she would put the hot dog in the sandwich, and that was my hot dog sandwich. So cheers to you, Charlotte.
So in that instance, especially with that background, I guess that would be a hot dog is a sandwich for you. Also, way to go, Mom, making sure nobody chokes on a hot dog. We love safety, it's good time.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to reach out to you about your hot dog sandwiches, maybe get your mom's recipe for a hot dog sandwich, or talk to you about anything warehousing, where can they find you outside the show?
You can find us. You can find me on LinkedIn. Wagner also has a page on LinkedIn. You can find us online at wagnerlogistics.com, or wherever good warehousing services are provided.
Awesome. Well, you guys heard it here first. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thanks, Mary. This has been fun.
Find Check All the Podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Don't forget to check out all the other incredible FreightWaves podcasts, such as Point of Sale and Truck Tech. Don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter on freightwaves.com/checkcall. See you on the internet.